Ой, у лузі червона калина.
Okay, today is Sunday, September 17th, 2023. And the weather is changing in Lviv for sure. It's definitely fall. I'm still wearing a t-shirt, but I'm not sweating like crazy like I was like 2 weeks ago. I mean, it was really hot, and it's now just perfect. But it does get cooler at night. So I'm going to give you a tour of Pekarska. This is a side street. This is the city center over here. You know, Roxolana, just to give you reference, the Meat and Justice restaurant is over that way. And so this is like a nice little side street. The reason why I got interested in this street is I'll show you the Indian restaurant at the end. This is the street where the Indian restaurant is. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So I'll just give you an update. For those of you not following Ukraine in the news. So Ukraine has been hitting back at Crimea. They sent some commandos over there, trained in England, you know, by the, Royal Marine Commando, and their elite unit is the Special Boat Service. So these guys were doing like World War II SBS type tactics, you know, landing on the shores, doing sabotage, took out some advanced radar and missile system, S-400 I believe, and then they were that cleared the way for a big missile strike. And Ukraine doesn't even have a navy, and they've already sunk half the Black Sea fleet. It's really it's really cool actually, but it's still a long road, you know. Oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention too is that yeah, what I want to mention is Kadyrov is in a coma. You know, this Chechen leader. I mean, it's not a surprise. Putin has gone, you know, full paranoid. He's, I just want to show you this architecture here. It's really interesting. It's like there's Polish buildings, Austrian buildings, and I think ones from the Soviet times. So it's like a mix here. The more elaborate ones are Austrian, I think, and then the ones that are somewhat elaborate are the Polish ones. So I'm not sure how to tell them apart. I imagine that these are Austrian, and I think that one there is Polish, you know, and then the ones that are just blocks are like Soviet time buildings. But anyway, back to this. So yeah, even with Putin going full paranoid and killing off his most capable leaders and his most capable allies, you know, I think he's pretty scared, because those capable allies are also the ones who have men and soldiers, and they are loyal to them and not Putin. And I think that's what he saw, and they could quickly turn against him. But even with this, it's still going to be a long war. I mean, when I was looking at some videos last night about the attrition, how that would play out, you know, they're doing some calculations. It can go on for years. I mean, both sides have populations in the millions of people. You know, Ukraine has like 35 million and Russia has 140 million. So they can do this war of attrition for a very long time. But unfortunately for Ukraine, it's like a race against time. Like in a basketball game, you know, there's the offense and the defense, or, you know, one team and the other team, but they also use the clock. You know, they use the clock as a factor. How long can they hold the ball and run the clock out? And we're seeing the Russians are kind of doing this sort of thing. They're trying to, you know, they have a whole propaganda machine in the U.S. with Tucker Carlson and Rand Paul and all this Fox News, you know, trying to win the Americans over to the Russian side. You know, do this sort of thing, and, you know, get the Americans, and, you know, get Trump reelected or some other pro-Russian candidate. So it's like Ukraine is really racing against the clock. I mean, they got like 8 months before U.S. elections kick off, and then you'll even see Biden and the Democrats go political and maybe back away from Ukraine. We don't know what can happen, but if I mean, Biden's already lost some ground. There's a nice restaurant here. It's a few nice ones. So this is like there's a vegan cafe and like a small supermarket, you know, mini market here. And then inside this fancy building, which I think is Austrian because it's got like a little doodad statue on top, like you see in Vienna. This is the garage. It's got like a boring, you know, name like a bar, like garage, but the food is actually pretty good. And then you have a lot of places. Yeah, back to the my commentary. I'll point out buildings. This is how I roll. Like if I see something interesting, I'll stop and point it out. Then I'll just fill the void with you know, my observations and what have you. So yeah, it's a lot of great architecture here. And this building here is like a Scandinavian design. They must have torn down some old Soviet building here and built this thing. It looks like a Swedish hotel. You know, and you go down all these streets, they have more of this Austrian and Polish architecture going on. But anyway, so yeah, Ukraine unfortunately is racing the clock. You know, so they have 8 months to grab as much ground as they can, and then before they're forced into a negotiation. You know, because Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy and, you know, I mean, I don't know if Mike Pence, I mean, Ron DeSantis, I don't know, he's on the fence somewhere. Mike Pence is on Ukraine's side. He's pro-Ukraine, but he doesn't have a chance. You know, he's like the Jimmy Carter of the Republicans. You know, nice guy, great moral character, but he ain't gonna win. You know, I mean, he's my personal favorite out of the whole bunch. You know, he'd bring back America to its conservative roots, but he's level-headed and he's fair. You know, but what can you do? So I was, yeah, I want to talk about this too. I was having a conversation with some of my foreigner friends. I wouldn't say they're friends, just people I chat with on Telegram. You know, you know, when you're living abroad and everything, you always seek people from your own country, and you want to share your perspectives. But you realize a lot of these people, many of them, there's many good ones here, but many of them in the Telegram groups, they're way off their rocker. But we were talking about, you know, the culture is changing in Ukraine. You know, culture is not a constant. The only thing that's a constant is change. You know, here's another street, nice street here. So yeah, the only thing that's always you know, culture is always changing, and culture is not like steady and stays in one place. And you know, the only, like I said, change is always happening. Things are always changing, whether it's the weather, the climate, the population. You know, that's always changing. So, but we have to ask ourselves, what is culture in the first place? And I looked up some definitions, you know, on Google, and it's basically like a set of values and beliefs that are passed from one generation to another. Another definition I saw was like symbols and institutions, you know, rituals, you know, that ensure the continuity of a society, or something along these lines. There's many definitions of culture. It's not even clear what it is. But what you can clearly see here in Ukraine, and especially in Western Ukraine, is that this was very much, you know, this was part of Austria-Hungary, and you can see a lot of influence of, you know, past, you know, cultures from you know, those areas. So there's been a lot of influence from the outside here. We're getting close to the Indian restaurant. It's right over there. This is a Lotus Indian restaurant. I just have to wait till the street is crossed. So yeah, there's a lot of these nice buildings were brought over here by the Austrians long back and everything. And even when you look at, you go to the, there's a restaurant in the Renox Square called Leopolis, and they have pictures of Lviv from way back, and everything was written in the Latin alphabet. You know, this Cyrillic didn't come around until like the Soviet times. It was, you know, it used to actually, everything was written in the Latin alphabet. It was very much like a very different place long back. Anyway, I want to just take a side thing here. This is the Lotus, yeah, the Lotus Indian restaurant, and I'll tell you, I ate there around 2 weeks ago, and I think the food is still in my stomach. One of the things I most look forward to when I go abroad is to find a good Indian restaurant. If you're like a very good Indian chef, Indian cook, and you understand a concept of fresh ingredients, I think you can make a lot of money here. You know, if you're really specialized in that. So enough said. I mean, it's definitely, I'm glad they are here, and they definitely have their clientele, but it's not for me. But anyway, let's get back to the video. So yeah, this is some, I'm not sure what this building is. I have to look it up and put it on the bottom here, but yeah, it's like, this is a nice open street, you know. So here, you see this little bit of, this building here is like some block that was probably built in the Soviet times, and then next to it is some older, like I think Polish building, and then right next to that, as you walk up, you get into like some Austrian style architecture. So it's like 3 in 1 here. And then here there's some, I think, Polish next to Austrian there. And supposedly these Austrian buildings are the most expensive. They're the most expensive ones, you know. But you know, for me, they're very small inside, and the floor plans are really uncomfortable. And then it's a real pain to renovate them because everything is just so old and falling apart. I mean, a lot of these buildings, the balconies are falling into the street. And again, that brings you to the culture, right? You know, the culture has got to be more than just preserving. They don't even preserve them here. They're just, you can see they're not really doing a good job of preserving these buildings. It's not like in Norway or Austria where they keep up the old stuff. Now this is cool. This was built in the Soviet time, I think. This is like some school or something, some institution of some sort. But yeah, culture is like more than like old buildings and costumes and you know, just you know, someone's race or ethnic background. There's a little bit more to it. You know, it's like they say, one of the definitions was institutions. You know, the institutions you create, the economy you create, because you need something to pass down. And I mean, Ukraine is changing. It's changing for the good. You know, I mean, they're definitely adopting the European electronic money. You can just pay with a card. You don't have to go around everywhere with cash. Just a few years ago, everything was done in cash, but it's more and more. I mean, even in the markets, even in these street markets, people have credit card machines. And but there's still, you know, bribery, corruption. I mean, I know someone personally, you know, he went to the war, and he was sent to a unit in East Ukraine, and his commander told him, if you pay me $8,000 every 3 months, you don't have to go to the front line. You know, I'll put you in a desk job somewhere and you can be safe, or you can even go home on leave. You know, we'll fix up the paperwork. Of course he refused. He wants to fight, you know. So that again, is the younger generation is tired of this corruption mentality, but the older one, this commander is probably around my age, 40s, 50s. He's still stuck in this Soviet thing. Now this is a place called Sherlock Holmes. It's some kind of hostel / restaurant. So upstairs I think is a hostel. It's quite famous. Now this church, it looks like a Protestant church. Yeah, I think this is the evangelical church. Yeah, so this is fully restored. But yeah, so this is still going on here. And even before the war, this kind of culture they have, this what you want to call Ukrainian culture, you know, the bad parts, this corruption and, you know, nepotism and all of this, it was driving people out. They were having mass emigration. You know, people with good skills were leaving for Europe as soon as they could. You know, it's the IT sector that really punches above their weight in Ukraine. And from the IT and engineering sector, you get all this technology you're seeing in the war, these drones and everything. These are like some really smart engineering-oriented people, and they were all leaving for Europe, you know, instead of staying here, because the people running the show and the people driving the culture were making it so miserable that people were leaving. You know, so, you know, like I said, most of the foreigners who think the culture is okay, and you know, other foreigners, we should, you know, be good guests and keep our mouths shut, they're totally lost. I mean, you have the Baptist church here trying to change things. You know, you have Ukrainians going and studying abroad. Some of them come back and they try to bring things back. So we all have to take part in this transformation, you know, because the consequences, what happened is Ukraine didn't want to be part of Russia, but they were too corrupt to be part of Europe. And so they were kind of put in the totally wrong spot. You know, they were left out in the cold, left out in the middle. They weren't, you know, and we don't live in this world where you can have everyone having their own small country and being neutral and being alone and self-sustaining. The world just doesn't work that way. You have to have alliances. You have to, you know, be part of partnerships and part of collective protective agreements, you know, where people are working together. This is a nice new building based on architectural cues of the old times. This is totally livable. Actually, I had to look into this one, if there's a 150 square meter apartment here. But yeah, it's contributed to a low birth rate. It's, you know, the life for the average Joe here is pretty miserable. And then the foreigners, of course, come in here because they like it. It's cheap, and, you know, there's a lot of pretty girls and whatever. And they think, okay, we should just keep it the way it is and not make this into America or not make this into Europe. But it's what we're hoping to do. You know, what I'm hoping to see is that this becomes a better version of America or a better version of Europe. Like, we get these strong European institutions, you know, and strong education system, you know, and medical care system like they have in European countries, especially in the Nordics. I would say, like, parts of Europe are in more trouble, work better than others. So when I'm referring to Europe, I'm referring to what I know. I know Norway. I'm a citizen of Norway, and I would like to see Ukraine, like, maybe have these institutions like Norway, but not these crazy taxes and, you know, restrictive rules for small business. It's really tough to run a small business in Norway and everything like that, and they have some over-the-top taxes on some things, you know, like your savings. You know, you've already paid tax on it, and if you accumulate savings, you know, they have a strong culture also in Norway of debt. You know, people take out loans for everything. Here in Ukraine, you buy everything cash. So if they could keep the interest rates high here, and, you know, that would favor average people, actually. It would favor saving your money. It would keep the house prices affordable. You know, the lower the interest rates go, the house prices start to skyrocket. It's actually better to have higher rates. That's how it was in the 70s and 80s in America. Actually, rates were pretty high, and then housing was more affordable because, you know, it favored you save up and have a good down payment. Whatever. I don't want to get sidetracked there. But then the better side of America we want to see the capitalism. You know, we want to see entrepreneurship. But, you know, we want to have, you know, like healthcare. You know, already healthcare in Ukraine is actually pretty good. My wife was telling me that she's having actually better luck in the government clinics than the private clinics. The equipment is newer. I don't know if this is like gifts from the West recently, but some of these government clinics are actually like really, really good, really nice. So, you know, and then, you know, have the USA without all this, you know, all this crazy, you know, woke stuff. You know, we have a nice protected border here. Obviously we have to. And then hopefully this ghetto culture in America doesn't make its way over here. But, you know, I saw cars thumping last night, you know, young Ukrainian guys, you know, blasting the stereo. So, I mean, you know, that's democracy is a bitch. Free speech is a bitch. You know, people will choose what they want to choose. But, you know, maybe there will be something people here would rather choose than, you know, just copycatting, you know, Western, you know, some of this Western culture. I mean, I have to agree, some of it is not great, but, you know, this is what we're all hoping for. I mean, I would also like to see, like in Norway, you know, English is an unofficial second language, and it's coming here. I noticed, you know, more and more places I go to, the menus are now, they've taken away the Russian and they're putting things in English. I mean, even my one of the contractors that is working on my apartment, you know, he comes and he built my kitchen, built my cabinets. Now he's remodeling my storage room so he can increase the storage by 3x, you know, putting up shelves. He doesn't speak English himself, but he said it's like the most important thing. And he's got his daughter enrolled in English courses, his like 6-7-year-old daughter, and he's really pushing her hard because he said that's the future. Ukraine's future is to be integrated with Western nations, you know, to provide them technology, you know, provide them food, pharmaceuticals, you know, even aerospace. You're going to see, you know, after the war or when the war changes phases, you know, if we go to like the Korean War style, you know, where we get to you know, where things cool down but they're not over. Korean War is still alive, by the way. The Korean War is still not over. People don't understand that. But in that time, you'll see a rise of, Ukrainian defense industry, and they're going to become specialists, because this is all underlined by the IT sector. They're going to they're already becoming very good in drones, and they're probably going to be the go-to people for drone technology. It's like Norway is the go-to country for, 50 caliber sniper rounds. The Nammo makes the rounds for the Barrett 50, and then they also make the air to or surface to air system, the one that protects the White House and one that's been protecting Ukraine. So every one of these countries has a niche. Like Germany is really good with these Leopard tanks, and I think Belgium makes some electronic avionics for the F-35. Ukraine is going to be like the drone country, and maybe hopefully they can build something cheaper and better than the Patriot missile system. That's, I think, where Ukraine, it's going to have to be international. They're going to need engineers from all over the world, just like the US started recruiting engineers from India in the 60s. And Norway was recruiting engineers from the Middle East. And, there's also a fair amount of Pakistani engineers in India. It's there since the 70s. So it's going to grow fast. They're going to have to fill these skill shortages. And all these people who have a fantasy about Ukraine being for only Ukrainians, that didn't work. That's how we got into this mess. It's going to become a very international country. It's going to be like Switzerland. Even Poland is becoming international. I was in Warsaw, and people want to make money. People want to be safe. They want a strong military, strong defense. To have that, you have to have a strong economy. And that's what the cultures revolve around. Cultures revolve around an economy, for the most part, whether people like it or not. And all this way of living and these rituals that you pass down. In the past it was based off of agriculture, and that's why you see all those like national dresses and symbols and icons of wheat or, whatever. But now it's going to be tech. It's always changing. Long back everyone was living in small tribes and little villages, and then one would attack another, and then a bunch of villages would band together and form a state, to fend off these rogue warriors and all these attacks. So that's where it's going. Ukraine is going to be a part of NATO. They paid in blood. They did the job with only spending 3% of the U.S. defense budget. And they basically wiped out half of the Russian military. So they definitely have earned their place in the NATO. This is definitely their right. I'll just show you some more stuff here. Yeah, so this is and then once this happens and they become part of the EU, part of the Schengen, it's going to be international. And I think most Ukrainians are going to benefit from this. The ones that have owned the land, own apartments here, or have services companies, building companies, do tremendous opportunities here. I just want to show you a Soviet building here. Like I said, there's so much contrast in the architecture in this place. Like, so this apartment block here right in front of me that I'm trying to show here is like this is like Soviet Union. This was probably a nice one because it's only 4 floors. This is probably for the people who really sucked off the Politburo or something. I don't know, but there were different types of Soviet apartments. Some are like 20 stories high, like you see in Kiev, and that was just like for worker bees. But this was probably a nice one in its time. And this still is probably pretty expensive, relatively speaking, because it's close to the center, to get something in here. Yeah, and then you can see the back. These are kind of like the Austrian type of buildings and everything. But this is where we're hoping Ukraine becomes like a better version of Europe. Having all the institutions, but a little bit more easier for small business, a little bit more looser, and that for maybe not so rigid. One thing about these living in these Western European countries, it is very rigid, very structured. There's definitely no corruption, or very little, I should say. It makes the news when it happens, and everything is on a computer. But it's really hard to. They have a lot of problem with innovation. In America, you have all this innovation, and you have all this opportunity, but it is a bit of a brutal society. If you fall through the cracks, you're done. Even with Obamacare and all this system they have set up, it's still really a rough ride, and It's you got to get your kids in the right school district, and they have all this fentanyl and all this craziness going on right now. So hopefully that won't find its way here. They can find the right blend between Europe and America. That's you know, like Ukraine, it's like I said, it's not, the culture is not set in stone here. It never was. If you read the history of this place, it never was. It's always changing. I mean, the core Ukrainian culture, I think, would be like hard work, resiliency, adaptability. I mean, Ukrainians are really hardworking. I mean, but this is not really culture. This is like internal characteristics that are shaped by your environment. I mean, you have people like this from India and people like this even in America who, you know, grew up on a farm. You know, it's basically like that, like American Amish farm kind of mentality, that these people will show up to work no matter what the weather is like, and they're ready to get down and dirty and, you know, get the job done. And like I said, mostly I've seen here in Western Ukraine, more so than Kiev and everything, people here are pretty straight. Personal safety is not a problem. I hope this doesn't get lost. You know, but what I would like to see improve is that people get this collective mentality to take care of these buildings. I mean, these buildings were left here a long time ago, and they're beautiful. And what you still have this like Soviet mentality where people really want to take care of their apartment, so they don't want to pay this communal fees and, you know, raise up the building fund so that they can you know, keep the facade up and do repairs and everything in the common areas. You know, you don't see. It's coming, but you know, you see it on the newer buildings, right? The newer buildings have younger people, usually who worked in IT, who've lived abroad, who understand that it's okay to share money in the area, you know, for the areas where you're not directly living in, because it raises the value of the whole building. But then you have a lot of like older people just stuck. But it's going to change, you know, you give it 20 years. It's come a long way from 20 years ago. You know, check this out. But unfortunately, it didn't come along fast enough. You know, and then the Russians took advantage of it. They took advantage of this limbo state where Ukraine, they're outside of Russia but not inside of Europe. And they saw some weakness, what they perceived was weakness, and decided to move in and grab what they could, you know. So now we got to get them out of this limbo state and help them build a society that people want to come back home to. And, you know, they start migrating back in, and also bringing like some really good immigrants as well, who can, you know, bring skills with them, and, you know, bring a proper Indian restaurant with them too. You know, me being a little bit selfish, I suppose, but yeah. Anyway, I think I think we're almost back. I just wanted to, this is the garage restaurant, so yeah, I think we're back into the main square here. But yeah, that's all I got. I hope you all have a nice day. I'm gonna be doing more videos of just walking around in the streets of Lviv, you know, and give you all these architectural tours with my limited architectural knowledge. All right, see you next time. Bye-bye.